FarmJoy. Yeah. And he's going to be talking about IPsys action software services.
So I tried to go with the trolliest on title. If anyone knows what I'm explaining, I refuse to. So my name is Schroeder, my handle is FarmJoy. I'm a security researcher and red teamer for the Adaptive Threat Division in Paris Group out here in Virginia. I'm a co-founder of the Veil framework, and I'm a founder of Veil Power Tools, which is the offensive PowerShell component. I always ask this, but how many people use the Veil framework on a regular basis? Awesome. I talked to a few cons. I was on the stage last year, Christopher Concert talked about ADA. So all this talk is ways to hunt for users on Windows domains. That's it. I'm going to cover as many tools and techniques and a bit of the trade craft as I can. I'm going to go over kind of the old school way, and then PowerShell stuff is going to heavily factor in some of the later methods. So this entire talk is from kind of the assumed breach perspective. Microsoft had this great Office 365 red teaming paper that came out with talking about this. Companies need to assume that they're hard to breach. So we do a lot of kind of post-exploitation, or post-compromise, post-exploitation type stuff. I'm also going to assume that you more or less know the users you want to go after. Some of the PowerShell methods you can query for user group and stuff like domain admins, but you're not always hunting just domain admins. The PowerShell methods are going to heavily utilize PowerView, which is one of the tools that I wrote for this past year. It's like a network situational awareness tool. The links on there. These slides are actually up live on SlideShare and tweeted out with my handle, FarmJoy. So the motivations for this, why would you actually need to hunt for users? Every single engagement that we're on, at some point we need to find where very specific people are logged in. A lot of times, if you have a local admin password, if you have some kind of desktop admin privileges, you want to laterally spread. This is the classic, fish a user, pop the box, get the local admin, see how it works. Used to in the past, we'd have to do a lot of scanning, maybe your family put the interpreter in each box, trying to figure out, sometimes by luck, where these particular high-value users are logged in. So again, you hunt, pop the box, and you catch and weed. Another time is if you already have domain admin privileges, you might want to hunt down where very specific people are to demonstrate impact. You can pop in the CEO's box, give them their email. We really like to go after incident response teams and then done multiple and see whether they're actually able to detect. So it's kind of the point of the title. Again, a lot of assessments, we like to demonstrate impact. A lot of CEOs like, I don't care if you got domain admin, but you can show them, you guys know, you can show them their email or something like that. It drives the point home a little bit more. So, where my sysadmins at? Finding your prey. There's a lot of tools that have been out there for a few years, some from Microsoft, some from other vendors, that will let you do this kind of searching. I'm going to cover everything that's out there, along with the positives and negatives for each. I'm going to go relatively fast. A lot of times it boils down to, do you need local admin of the remote machine you're enumerating, or do you not? And I really like this term, offense in depth. You always want multiple ways of achieving the same component of your attack chain. You don't want to hit one step. You're trying to hunt for users, and like maybe AD catches the executable you're using, maybe PowerShell is disabled, or do something like that. So I like having options so you can fall back and always be successful. First tool, this is psloggedon's component of system terminals. It determines who's logged in by scanning remote registry stuff, as well as using the netsess.exe API call underneath, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Again, because you need this remote registry access to determine who's logged in, you need admin privileges on the machine that you're enumerating. This tool can kind of automatically pull some target hosts and stuff from an Active Directory. The links down there is just system terminals. So this is kind of what it looks like. psloggedon for hunting for restaurants or something like that here in the domain. You see it's going to enumerate all the hosts and all this information is going to come back based on the remote registry. We used to use this for a while, but again, like you need local admin in the boxes you're running it against, so it really kind of limits the times you're going to be able to use this during occasion. Netsess.exe is a part of the Joeware toolkit. These have been around for almost a decade. This is really awesome because this netsess.exe API call that I mentioned, it's essentially like a net session that works on remote machines. So you can run this against a file server or something like that and get a really good mapping of who's connected back. It's really useful if you use it against a server that a lot of people connect to, which I'll go over some of that PowerShell stuff. And what's great too is you don't need admin privileges on this. You can be an unprivileged user, and for some reason Microsoft decided that doesn't let you get all this remote session information. You need to be a domain user, but you don't have to be privileged. This is kind of what it looks like. You know, running against like a file server or a DC or something like that. Some more people have lots of sessions. You kind of see this username, this domain is logged in here from this particular address. So we've been using this for a couple of years. It's pretty effective. I'm sure some people in the server would use it as well. The disadvantage is it's an executable. You have to drop it to disk. You have to get the raw data back from an output file and parse everything manually. So you can get the information, it's just not as nice as the PowerShell stuff. There's a tool released by Cornline Coder. Really cool tool, PVEFindADUser. It helps you find your AD users who log in. You can also check, like the last remote registry stuff again. Check the last logged in user for a particular key. But even states like in the description you need admin access again. So, kind of two classes, need admin or not need admin. The link's down there. It's off his Cornline main page. You kind of see here, you run it. It'll enumerate all the machines in the domain again. It'll process particular hosts. We've used this a few times, but it's kind of limited. It's more or less only kind of useful if you already have domain admin or desktop admin or something like that. Netview.exe is a really cool project from Al Fuller, as mentioned earlier. Presented at DerbyCon 2012. It's a C++ project that enumerates systems using Windows API calls. So underneath the hood, it uses like netshare num, netsession num, networkstation num. So you can get remote shares, you can get remote sessions, and remote logon users. The networkstation num API call doesn't really have kind of the native Windows tool equivalent. You can also check share access, highlight users, and use a delay jitter and things like that. You can get a lot more information if you have local admin privileges on a particular box that you're enumerating. But for a lot of this, we don't need remote admin. So we started using this about 6 months after it came out. Super awesome, super effective. It's very, very fast, but it generates a lot of traffic because it's going to touch every single machine on the entire network. Most places aren't really going to detect this, but there's a couple places that they're doing kind of IDS heuristic stuff. If they see one host touching every single other host by SMB, it can even trigger like SMB form rules and things like that. Really cool tool. It's actually kind of the original inspiration for some of the PowerShell stuff. So it looks like you run it, there's a whole lot more output, but it enumerates all the machines, uses every single box. You see the shares and stuff like that too. The remote session, the remote login users. There's also a function now, you can specify a domain group with domain admins, and it'll highlight the specific flag saying, this user you might care about is logged in here. Again, a ton of data, and it can take a while sometimes. It's really nice, but C++ isn't quite as flexible as something like PowerShell. If you're on a Linux box, you can use this pretty cool SMB and num users in a C script. You need some kind of valid local account or a valid domain account to get the information for a remote machine. But it does that same kind of session enumeration against remote boxes. Because in Nmap, you can specify all the targets you want and do all these typical types of things. It's pretty cool. We use it a few times. If you're on like a local pen test and you have just like a Cali box with a tap or something like that, you can use this. What it looks like, you get this raw results back. You're going to get a lot of information. And one thing we've done before is if you fat finger the password here, you can very easily lock out accounts across the entire day. This is trying to run like. I'm not saying I've done that, but awesome account lockout. Another kind of cool method that we've used a few times is if you pop a user and you have access to their internal email somehow, whether through MOA or whatever the portal is, search for other emails from other users and check the X originating IP header. This isn't always present, but it sometimes is. So, we've done this to find like IR guys, look at, they send an email out about an incident or something like that, and just check the header, and oh, I think this is the range for all you IR people out. So PowerShell, Microsoft's post exploitation language. If you've ever met me, I'm just talking about PowerShell. The PowerView, the tool I wrote, originally had a port for Invoke, NetView, and things like that. Started playing with the functionality and realized, for users all the time. Why don't we just do some PowerShell methods for this? The User Hunter will query, super flexible. It will query domain for all users or a target list. You can do a single user list, whatever you want. Same with a host. You can query the domain called a host, just host in specific OUs. You can do a list, anything like that. Delays, jitters, all that flexibility. Underneath, it uses the same API calls. So in PowerShell, it can get a bit tricky, but you can get access to the lower level Windows API. But using this net session network station, it'll query all that to every machine and then match up against the target list. You can also check if you have local admin privileges in the boxes you find. So sometimes we just run this, come back 20 minutes later, and then we know exactly where domain admins are logged in, and if we have access to the box, then we can just pop it easily.
How's the query AD?
Sorry?
How's the query AD?
It's the ADSI accelerators or whatever. PowerShell like hooks and stuff in the AD. It's meant to be, management language, so it's super easy to get hosts using those particular queries. So it looks like, you can run this, whether if you're like actually physically out of box, RDP, or through your particular agent. So Self-User Hunter, this is one of my favorites. It uses a full red team trick where it queries Active Directory for all user objects in the AE and extracts the home directory field, which in a lot of organizations are where file servers are specified. It unifies that list and then enumerates sessions against all those, checking against the target user list. So you get maybe like 60–70% like kind of decent coverage. It's not going to be as accurate as User Hunter because it's not touching every single machine, but it's much stealthier. You have one queried Active Directory and then just a handful kind of session calls against some file servers, which they have a ton of SMB traffic. We've never seen anyone detect this. I don't see how maybe they could, but it's essentially using kind of native mobile functionality. And again, no admin privileges are needed. Pretty cool. See here, like kind of in the background, it's enumerating users, extracting the file servers, checking for domain admins with Chris. One other method that we came up with recently is offensive event parsing. So if you already have domain admin privileges and you can query the event log in the domain controller, there's no reason that you can't just pull out all the login IDs and say, oh, here's where each single user is logged in. Again, we need domain admin privileges pretty high. We like to fall back to this, kind of use it. Once we're already to that point, then we get DA privs, we want to find IR guys or CEOs and things like that. So get user login events in PowerView, implements 6 works if there's any reactivate. And the Invoke-UserLogon Hunter will weaponize all this up to a really nice scriptable form. This is what it looks like. You just run it. It's actually going to, in the background, enumerate every single domain controller on the domain itself. Go to each one of those, get all the event logs, and then parse that and check for a particular user. By default, if you don't have like the username flag, it's just going to go for domain admins or whatever group you want. So this, you can do this manually. We've done it manually. It's kind of a pain to search through. There's a lot of event logs in the domain controller. So PowerShell makes it pretty easy. It's actually a pretty short section of the script. That's it. I'm kind of fast, but any questions for a minute or two? Yes.
Yeah, can you use wildcards or something like that?
Can we use wildcards for which part?
When you're invoking it, doing a search.
Yeah, you can use I think there's multiple ways to specify like machines and things like that. You can use wildcards as part of the names, or OUs, and I think for users you can do like SPNs, service principal names and stuff like that. If anyone has any more ideas for like the ways to get the particular targets, just let me know or hit me up with an issue and GitHub or something. There's also a couple methods that you can search for groups of interest, all by wildcards, like search any group that has Linux in it or admin in it and things like that.
Any of these tools rely on the NetBIOS protocol, or is it all?
No, there's no NetBIOS. It's one other method. We tried that. It's kind of been unreliable in some domains. But yes, so the question is, do any of these rely on NetBIOS? There's a couple tools out there that do an MPT scan and things like that, but we just haven't had as much luck in newer Windows domains, like 2008, 2012 type stuff that's locked down in NetBIOS. Any other questions? Yes.
For speed, do you find Self-User Hunter is a lot faster?
Yeah. So that's a good point. The question is, do I find that Self-User Hunter is a lot faster than User Hunter? It definitely is, because if you're on a domain with thousands and thousands and thousands of machines, and you're trying to do these enumeration protocols against every single one of them, it can take hours to, like it can take a while. Self-user hunter, because you're enumerating all the user objects, even in a giant domain, that doesn't take that long. And I think the max we've really seen is maybe 20 to 30 file servers, so it goes really, really fast, usually like 3 to 5 minutes, something like that. Alright, that's it. Thank you.